Complex Boolean operators, sometimes referred to as logical operators, allow us to create more complex Boolean expressions or conditions. There are three main complex Boolean operators, and they are the AND, the OR, and the NOT. So the first example here is, if it is Saturday and yesterday was payday, let's play golf. In order for us to play golf, both of those expressions have to be true. It has to be Saturday, and yesterday had to be a payday. So when you see an AND, both sides must be true for the whole expression to be true. The second example here is, if you have $60 in your pocket, or yesterday was payday, let's go out for steak dinner tonight. With the OR, either side of the expression can be true, and the whole expression is true. So I may only have $40 in my pocket, but yesterday was payday. That'd be a true expression. Or I might have $60 in my pocket, but tomorrow is payday. I'd still go out for a steak dinner, because one side or the other is true. And then the third operator is the NOT operator. The NOT operator turns a true expression into a false expression, and a false expression into a true expression. So you think of something that's not true as false, and something that's not false as true. So here, the expression, you have $60 in your pocket, or yesterday was payday, would be evaluated first. And let's say that comes out to be a false expression. I have $40 in my pocket, and tomorrow's payday. Neither side is true, so the whole expression is false. But then the NOT turns that not false into a true. And now I'm evaluating that interior expression really for a false value. So this whole thing is true, and therefore the expression inside the if fork will be executed, and we'll have peanut butter and jelly again. Now in ActionScript, we don't use the words and, or not. Instead, we have some specific operators. Instead of and, we would use a double ampersand. So it is Saturday and yesterday was payday. Instead of or, we use two vertical pipes. Now a lot of students are familiar with the vertical pipe on the keyboard. It is just above the enter key. It's a shift backslash. So two of those together creates an or. And then the not operator in ActionScript is the exclamation mark. Now when we think about the complex operators, they are a substitution for a nested if structure. So here I have, if it is Saturday and yesterday was payday, let's play golf. I could have also written that as, if it is Saturday, and if that's true, then I'll evaluate if yesterday was payday, and if that's true, let's play golf. So as we see a lot of times in programming, there's multiple ways to do the same thing. Some of it is just personal preference, some of it relates to readability. Either way of writing code would be acceptable. Let's take a look at an example in Flash of using a complex Boolean operator. So let's say we're creating an exam review, an interactive exam review for students for history class. And so here'd be one frame of that exam or that review, and the question would be, enter the last name of Richard Nixon's vice president. And there's an input text box here, which is named input_txt. They're going to enter the last name there. Then there's a button here called grademe_btm, which they will click, and that will provide some feedback in this feedback_txt text box of whether they got it right or wrong. Let me go ahead and let's just go ahead and look at the code. So in the code, we have our event listener for the grade me button. It's going to respond to a click event, and it's going to run a function called gradeAnswer. And here's my function. Doesn't return anything, it's void. We have a string variable called xyz, which is going to equal the text that is in that input_txt text box. And I'm going to convert that to lowercase, so when I do a comparison, case sensitivity will not come into play. Then I have an if structure. And here I'm using a complex Boolean operator of or, because it's sort of a trick question. Richard Nixon had two vice presidents. The first one, last name, would be Agnew. So if XYZ equals Agnew, or XYZ equals Ford, Joe Ford was the second vice president, then our feedback that we're going to place into feedback_txt The text property is correct. Spiro Agnew was Nixon's first vice president, and Gerald Ford was his second VP. If neither one of these are matches, if both sides are false, this whole expression is false. Now, it doesn't matter if the right side is true or the left side is true, it would be true. But if they're both false, it's false, and we'd run the else fork, and what would go into the feedback text box would be, sorry, that is wrong, try again. Let's go ahead and run this. So if I put in Smith and say, how did I do? I'm told, sorry, that is wrong, try again. Okay, so let's put in Ford. How did I do? Correct. Spiro Agnew was Nixon's first vice president, and Gerald Ford was his second VP. If I type in Jones, I'm told, sorry, that's wrong. But if I type in Agnew, click how did I do, I'm told that that is correct. So both of those answers are being accepted as correct using that OR operator. Let's look at another example. In this example, I've drawn a rectangle, and I've got a text box down here, which is a dynamic text box named output_txt. I want the output of this text box display if my mouse pointer is either inside or outside the rectangle. So it should say the mouse is inside the rectangle or the mouse is outside the rectangle. And the way I'm going to do that is using some logical AND operators. Let's take a look at the code. So I'm adding an event listener that is responding to an enter frame event. And it's going to call a method or a function called check mouse position. Now, I don't have an object in front of this, but it really would be the same thing as saying stage. So I'm creating an event listener for the stage itself. Either way would work. I could leave stage off. That's going to be implied. Or I can add the keyword stage there. Here's my function. I've got a variable called xPOS or xPOS, stands for xposition. It's a number variable, and it's going to equal the stage.mousex. Now remember, the upper left-hand corner is our 0, 0 coordinate. And then I have another one called yPOS, which is going to look for the value of the mouse location from the y coordinate system, which is from the top. So x is from the left, y is from the top. And let me just jump back here to my rectangle here real quick and show you that the position of the left side of the rectangle is 100 pixels from the left, and the right side is 400 pixels from the left. And then the top is 50 pixels from the top of the stage, and the bottom of the rectangle is 250 pixels from the bottom, or from the top of the stage. Let's go back to our code for a minute. So here's my expression. I'm looking at 4 different values that are joined together by complex AND symbols. So if x position is greater than or equal to 100, and xPOS is also less than or equal to 400, which means on the x coordinate system it's somewhere inside the rectangle, and yPOS is greater than or equal to 50, and it's also less than or equal to 250. So that means it's also inside the rectangle from the top down. If all of those are true, and remember for ANDs, everything on both sides of the equation has to be true. So when it's evaluating this, it's actually going to look at these two first and say, okay, if that's true, then I'm going to have a true and this one. And if that's true, I'll have a true and this one. And if that's true, then the whole thing is true. If that's all true, then it's going to put inside our text box, the mouse is inside the rectangle. If any of those are not true, it's going to tell me the mouse is outside the rectangle. So if the mouse is to the left of the rectangle, or it's to the right of the rectangle, or it's above, or it's below, it's going to tell me it's outside the rectangle. Let me demonstrate this. So now it's saying the mouse is outside the rectangle. As I point and move inside the rectangle, it tells me it's inside the rectangle. If I come out, it's outside. Back inside, outside, inside, outside. Now, one thing I need to point out, we only have one frame, but in reality, even though we only have one frame, this is looping. So our execution is looping in 24 times a second, because that's our frame rate. It is evaluating every time it enters that frame this check mouse position function and updating our output. And you can see it was pretty responsive. Now let's look at the opposite example of this using ORs. So basically the same problem, same application, but my code is slightly different. Here I'm using ORs instead of ANDs. And what I'm looking for is if the X position is less than 100 or it's greater than 400. So here's to the left of the rectangle, here's to the right. Or if Y pos is less than 50, meaning the mouse is above the rectangle, or it's greater than 250, meaning it's below the rectangle, then my output, and I've switched these two statements, the output is the mouse is outside the rectangle. But if this is a false statement, which means that none of these were true, and thus the mouse is inside the rectangle, our output's going to reflect that and say the mouse is inside the rectangle. Again, let me demonstrate that. Inside, outside, inside, outside, outside, inside, outside. So oftentimes, depending on how we write the condition, we can switch the ands and the ors. So you just have to think through logically what it is you want to evaluate and how to write that expression. That is the trick to using conditions, whether using a complex operator or just a simple Boolean expression.